In amongst all the cold Scottish winter weather, it was looking like it was going to be a quiet spell overnight, so I started the car up with a layer of frost covering the windscreen, indicating that it was going to be a cold night, and set about heading up to the glen for a long hike around the loch. I wasn't too sure at this point exactly where I was going to camp, but I was hopeful that I would find a nice suitable spot around halfway around my intended route, which was to take me over 4 or 5 peaks, 1 Corbett and 1 Munro. It was looking fine though, and I'd set about getting up the hill as soon as I'd packed and left the car. The weather was good, if not a bit windy at this point. Wow, what a place. Hello and welcome to Highland Perthshire. What a beautiful, beautiful part of Scotland this is. And today's adventure, as you can probably see, I've got my big pack on. It's the heaviest pack of the year. It's a winter wild camp. I've got my crampons, ice axe, plus all my camera gear and my camping gear. And the plan is, providing this wind doesn't pick up anymore, because it's pretty gusty at the moment, the plan is down here below me is a loch, and I'm hoping to circumnavigate the loch, and there are numerous hills on the way around. There's 1 Corbett and 1 Munro, and I'm hoping to get a nice shelter spot about halfway and then finish them off tomorrow. So it's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful day. I've been here before, you might recognise it, but I've never done this route, so I'm really looking forward to this. So enough talking, let's get walking. So up I went, and with most high level routes, the initial climb up to the first peak is always the hardest, and it has the most ascent, but it got me up pretty quickly and pretty high, and the views back down the loch were spectacular. This is archive footage here, which I did on a trip here a few years ago, but you can see the views are just spectacular. And I soon made it up to the first hill, which has 2 cairns on it. And I didn't actually stop here to do a bit to camera like I usually would, because there was a chap here enjoying his lunch, and I didn't want to get in his face and annoy him by doing a bit to camera. So I got up here and then headed on towards the second peak, which took me across some peat hags and boggy ground. But you know what? One of the advantages of it being so cold was that all the peat was frozen. After navigating my way through those peat hags, I was soon ascending a bit higher, and before long I was approaching the highest peak that I was going to go up today, and the wind was certainly blowing at this point. It wasn't very pleasant. Oh, I'll tell you. Oh, goes back on. That's me at the highest point of today, not the highest point of the round. And yeah, I've not done that many bits to camera because it's been cold. Really cold, the wind's kind of cutting through me. So anyway, from this high point I need to drop back down. There's another hill to go over, but once I've done that I need to find some water before I find the pitch, because yeah, to keep the bag a wee bit lighter I only put a litre of water in my 2 litre bag. So next stop will be to find water and then hopefully find a pitch. But the views are starting to open up to the north now. I can see some of the snow-capped mountains, and the highest point of tomorrow is currently in the cloud, but it does have snow in it, so I'm glad I've got the crampons and ice axe. But yeah, it's pretty cold. I came up over the first hill. As I said, I didn't do anything to camera there, but I have been there before. I'll put some footage up just now. There's 2 cairns up there. There's a cairn for the top of the hill, and there's another cairn, should I say, called King Kenny's cairn, and I talked about that in the last video when I was wild camping up here. I'll put a link to it here somewhere, but it's a memorial to I don't know if he was a king or whether he was the future king, but he got killed at a battle down at a place called Moniverde, which is on the way up. I drove past it on the way here. There was a battle there, I think in the 11th century. So there's a memorial there. I think he's buried in Iona. But anyway, more details in that other video, because I did research it for that. But it's lovely. The landscape's fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting the tent up and getting cosy in my tent, to be honest with you. Anyway, right, I'll sit here for a bit longer and then we'll get going. I headed on and dropped down to the Bealach, and before long I was heading up in the sunshine towards the third summit of the day, which had great views back down the loch, and you can see the round that I was going to be doing over the next 24 hours. But high in my mind at this point was trying to locate a wild camping spot, because the sun was starting to lower in the sky and I knew I didn't have that many hours of daylight left to find a suitable pitch. Oh, right folks, I've just come down off the third top, which is behind me here. And what I did when I was up there, because I knew I'm going to have to camp in a wee while, because you can see the sun's starting to lower. I've got about an hour until it gets dark. And when I was on the high ground, and because I had a view, I kind of scouted out possible spots for the tent when I was coming down. And there's a wee bit of raised ground over there, which looked like it had a wee bit I don't know if it's grass or not, but it looked like it was grassy and flat. And it's also on the south side of this ridge here, and the wind is to turn to the north tonight, so hopefully that'll give us a wee bit of shelter. It's a wee bit less windy down here, he says, as a gust comes in. But yeah, I think I'm going to go and try it out over there, and then once I've got a spot where I'm going to pitch my tent, before I pitch the tent I need to get some water. And you can see there's some lochans behind me here. The only issue is some of them are frozen. There's not much running water, so that could be interesting. Right, let's go and get the tent up. Let's go. That's the flat bit that I saw. It's a Lochan. Good for water, not for camping on. Well, it's frozen, so maybe need to find somewhere flat el pronto. Most of the ground that I'd walked across was pretty heatherly, and there wasn't too many grassy spots or level spots, but down at these two lochans I managed to find a wee bit of grass, as you can see here. But a note to beware of is that it wasn't very level, and I was just lucky that I had my big thick winter ground mat to put down. It would have proven a bit of an uncomfy pitch if I didn't have that big thick ground mat. So I set about trying to get the tent up in a spot which had the most level ground, which was pretty hard. But yeah, I was kind of glad, because this Frozen Lochan, it was going to provide a source of water for me, which meant I didn't have to drop down too far to try and find some water for my afternoon coffee and my evening meal. It was lovely. It was a nice wee spot actually, and the winds weren't too bad down here. And I set about getting the tent up and my camp ready for the night ahead. Right, hi folks. Since the last time you saw me, you'll have seen me getting my tent up, and I've got a lovely spot, and I'm going to give you a tour of the campsite in just a minute. But I've come over to there's these really unusual rocks, and they looked unusual, and I thought I'll come and have a look at them. And from the side of the tent, they provide a lovely gateway, but from this side there's two faces. It's rather uncanny. See if you can see the faces. If I spin you around, I don't know if it'll focus. And there we go. So face number one, I think, here. There's a face there, and there's another face on the other side. Just about there. Can you see that? Rather uncanny. And then if through the back you can just about see the tent. These giant faces. How bizarre is that? Pretty odd, isn't it? So anyway, let's go down. I can say that this is the gateway. The gateway, the front door to my mansion. So I'll take you down and I'll show you around the camp. So I'll spin you around so you can see where I am going. Right, let's go. Right, hopefully you can see me, hopefully this is focusing. This was the area that I saw from high in the hillside that I thought, when I looked down, it looked like flat grass, but it was actually a wee Lochan. And when I came up, I was a bit disappointed, but I then came down here and there's another Lochan, and I've managed to get my tent pitched up. There's not much even ground here, so I'm glad I've got the thick ground mat. It's not going to be super comfy, but I'm right next to the water source, which is great. It's fantastic. It's a bit cold and frozen over, but I will get water. It's not frozen over on that side of the lake. And then over here, that's the high point for tomorrow. That's the Monroe. But it's rather nice. If I can't get water from the other rock, I can do that one. And if I go up here, well, there's one more thing I want to show you around here. So along with the sinister faces over there, there's also a skull. Like that. So with my two spooky rocky faces and a sheep's skull for company, I settled down and had a coffee and just watched the dusk skies roll by, and before long darkness had enveloped the glen and I was snug in my tent with a lovely moon above me. There was a high layer of wispy cloud which was producing a moon halo which was absolutely fab. So I decided to head out and see if I could take any photographs of the tent, the Lochan and the moon with its halo. So I'm just out taking some photographs, and you can see the tent there reflected in the wee Lochan with the ice round the edges. And if you look up, if I spin this up a bit, hopefully you can hear me okay. There's a lovely halo around the moon tonight. Some high level cloud like that, absolutely lovely. So I'm going to try to take some pictures of that halo. Don't know if you can make that out or not, but it's absolutely gorgeous. There's the tent. Lovely. Right, take some more pictures. One more look at that. Look at that. Cracking, eh? Having played about with the camera and some astrophotography of the moon, it was time to head back to the tent, where I set about getting my evening dinner on, which I was looking forward to because it was a rather cold and I was hoping that this was going to warm me up. After enjoying my camp dinner and my evening meal, I decided to get my wee camping stove or wood burner out, which sits off the ground, and I had a wee log burner which I got on and got the fire going and settled down, enjoying the fire with a wee dram. Well, this is just lovely after a hard trek today, and I must admit I was feeling quite tired today. There's not much in the way of paths up and round the way I came, and that does take it out of you, and having the big backpack with all that extra weight in it I was glad to get here and find a pitch. It's lovely, and it's quite scenic next to this wee Lochan. It's lovely. Anyway, I was going to say, so that the loch that I'm going round and circumnavigating and doing all these hills is called Loch Turret, and it's a dammed loch, and I think originally there was a loch there. It was about a mile long, and the glen was dammed. I don't know if it was the 60s, 50s or 60s, I can't remember exactly when, but I do have a story about it, and I remember my mum telling me this. So my mother's side of the family is from Crieff, which is very close to here. It's not far at all, and we had a clothes shop. It's still there actually, a draper's shop, which my grandfather had started. And his father had a shop in Perth, which is long gone, but the shop in Crieff is still there. And he used to come up when the builders were building the dam, when the construction workers were up, and he used to come up and sell them Wellington boots and thermals and these sort of things. So he had a business mind on him, did my grandpa. He came up here, so I can perhaps I can say I've had relatives that helped in the building of the dam here. But anyway, it's lovely. So yeah, this fire makes all the difference. It's certainly below freezing. I'd actually broken the ice to get some water, which you probably saw earlier, and literally about 20 minutes later I was in the same spot, and that bit where I'd broken the ice had refrozen. So it's certainly cold. This fire's certainly helping. I've got it in the wee fire stove thing, so it's off the ground, it's not damaging the ground, which is important. You should try and leave no trace and all that sort of stuff. So this is great. It keeps it off the ground, and boy, it's nice. And the other thing which is warming me up this evening is some whisky. I've got some Glenlivet, so I'm going to enjoy this just now. Enjoy the fire before hitting the hay, and the next time you'll see me will hopefully be in the morning, where the weather will be hopefully nice and benign. The winds have certainly dropped, so let's hope that they stay relatively low. So after a relatively good night's sleep, I awoke to a frozen camp, and the first thing that I thought about was some coffee to give me some caffeine and also to warm me up. It was a cold, cold morning high in the mountain. Good morning. It's what time's it now? It's actually 9 o'clock on the nose. We are in the dead of winter, and I think the temperature was hovering around freezing, maybe a bit below. The grass round about here is all frozen, and obviously the Lochan's still well frozen. But I slept okay. So I slept really well because I didn't wake up till about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And the only thing that woke me up was there was these huge cracks, or they sounded huge and loud. And what it was the ice around the side. Well, I think it was anyway. It might have been something else, which I'll come on to. But I think it was just the ice around the side of the Lochan cracking and breaking as it was moving. I mean, there's no flowing water in this wee pond, but I think as the ice was freezing, it was probably lowering a wee bit, and then I don't know. Anyway, it was cracking and making a hell of a noise, and I had these thoughts running through my head. I was dreaming of stone rock monsters stepping on the ice, coming to crush me in the tent. Don't know where I got that idea from. Anyway, I'll have to say goodbye to my faces. I'm going to pack up, and I'm going to traverse a steep-sided slope to get to the col, and then immediately it's to pull up to the highest point on the round. And there's a wee bit of snow on the top there, so I'm looking forward to getting up there. The forecast is, the cloud is above the summits, but the forecast is for the winds to pick up in the next hour or two from the north, gusting up to about 30 or 40 miles an hour, so I'll be keen to get up there as soon as I can. So I'm just going to enjoy my coffee, and then I'm going to straight camp and start the hike up the hill. It's not warm though. Having got all my camping gear away, I just made sure I hadn't left anything behind. Remember that leave no trace motto that we need to all abide by. And anyway, I'd left the camp, and the wee track that I'd spotted up the side of the hill, I headed for that, and boy was it scenic, but boy was it also slippy, and yeah, it required a lot of my concentration, which I'll talk about in a wee while. But it was nice when you got the views back down the loch, let's put it that way. Whew. Well, I tell you, I am glad to be here. That's me at the col between the mountain to the south and the highest mountain I'm going up today. So the next part of the journey is going to be the pull up to the highest point in the round. But I tell you something, it's taken me quite a bit of time to get here from the campsite. It's not a great distance between here and there, but I was following, I wanted to keep quite high up, so there was an animal track. I'm reluctant to call it a path, I think it was a deer track, which traversed round the side of the mountain. And don't get me wrong, it was absolutely beautiful path, but because it was an animal track, it was on steep ground, so the path wasn't exactly level. The shale and the rocks were all covered in verglass, and the worst bit was the heather. Where the heather had been worn down by the deer, it was on a slant with ice over it, and there was a bit I didn't film, which was just across a steep heathery slope with all the heather roots going the wrong way, and that was I wouldn't advise it. In hindsight, although it was beautiful, if I do this round again, I'll probably drop down onto the main path from Loch Turret up, a lot safer and probably a lot quicker. So anyway, the sun is coming out. I don't know if you can see that. There's a weather front and a band of clouds moving south as the northerly winds coming, and the sun's just starting to poke its head up above that weather front. So who knows, we might get some sunshine up here on the summit. Let's go and find out. At the Bila here, the ground was frozen solid, and I knew that the higher up I got, the snow line would be encountered. And yeah, I did have my ice axe and crampons with me, but given the nature of the ground and the terrain I was on, I didn't think I would actually need them, but it's always good to have them just in case. Anyway, those views just continued to amaze me as I went up. Still beautiful views down Loch Turret. And before long I was starting to get into the snow and across the snow line as I headed up towards the highest mountain on the peak, and Munro as well. Oh, here I am on the summit of the highest point of the round that I'm doing, and this mountain's called Ben Hornsey, and it's a Munro. It sits at over, I think it's 930 metres, somewhere around about there, and some call it, or it has been described as a dull hill, but you know what, do yourself a favour, don't come up from the Glen Leadnock side, come up from Glen Turret. It's anything but dull, or do the round that I'm doing today. What an adventure I'm having, it's really great. Anyway, it's really quite cold. There's a layer of snow and frost covering everything, and this cloud is just sitting over the summit. I can see up there blue sky, and when it was coming up, all the other hills just have it's just those conditions where you get the cloud capping the summit of the hills. So yeah, I'm going to have the wind at my back now, heading down the ridge, and there's one more hill to go. So enough talking, let's get going. Woohoo! I didn't hang around too long on the summit of Ben Hornsey. I hung around for a wee while, but I just didn't get that feeling that the cloud was going to clear, so I started to descend down the western side to complete the round of Loch Turret, and before long I was back down under the snow line and back onto that frozen turf and heading towards the last summit of the day, which sits at about 750 metres if memory serves me right. And before long I was starting to ascend and approach the summit of this final mountain, and boy, that forecast was bang on. The wind was howling up here. You probably can't tell it from this footage, but I was getting blown about with that big backpack on, so I decided to touch the summit trig and then try and find some shelter to do a piece to camera. Oh man, I don't know if you can hear it, I can hear it whistling over the top. I've come down the back of the final summit of the day to get some shelter, and this is the last top before I start heading down. Thank God. I am absolutely knackered. I'm really looking forward to getting to the car, and as forecast, that northerly wind has really picked up. Even on the highest point it was pretty benign, but this point here I was literally getting blown about. It doesn't help that I've got this big massive rucksack on acting as a sail. Anyway, it's nice and calm here, the wind's scooting over my head about 5 metres behind you. And a great place to finish the video really, lovely views out west. I can see south towards the Lomond Hills in Fife, over towards the Sidlaws and Tayside. It's just a fantastic place. I really, for those of you that don't come up to do hills other than Monroes and Corbett's, even coming up to this hill here, which I did maybe 5 or 6 years ago, is fantastic. You get some lovely views, and I was amazed the first time I came up here, and I'm amazed today. You can actually see the Isle of Arran way out on the skyline. These jagged peaks, far away. Not sure how many miles away that is. I'll put a link here, but it's just a lovely viewpoint. You're looking straight down into Comrie. Lovely. Anyway, right. I'm not going to hang around here because if that wind gets up anymore, I'll be getting blown off down into Comrie. So let's get back to the car. Thanks very much for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Right, back to the car.